whiskey in Japan and call it bourbon. So it's, I think, really an American thing, but worldwide, it's amazing, right? I mean, you guys are exporting like $1 billion of bourbon, I mean, American distillers worldwide.
That's true. This was a record year. We haven't actually produced this much since 1970, so 45 years until we've been able to actually distill that much, and it was a record year for exports. It is an American product, has to be made in America, as you said, and it has no artificial ingredients. You can't add anything to it, no coloring, no flavoring, and that's another reason why it's booming as well. It's natural.
There is some controversy, I should say, about if it's handcrafted and what that means. How do you define handcrafted? How long does it take if you have to meet up with this kind of demand?
It can take, depending on the spirit, usually 2 years minimum for bourbon, 4 years if you don't have an age on your label, and some bourbons are as old as 23 years old, so it takes a long time. We've put in our books, for Knob Creek, for instance, the 2023 forecast is already done. We've decided what that is, and we put it
2023?
Yeah, it's a 9-year-old product.
Right now, do you have enough supply for all the demand?
We do. We produced over half the bourbon in the world, and actually we were responsible for half the growth of bourbon last year. There are 5.3 million barrels of bourbon in Kentucky right now. Again, a record, and that's more bourbon barrels than there are actually people living in Kentucky.
You talk about the importance of authenticity right now. Are you seeing a lot of wannabes chime in? When you talk about being made in Kentucky, I feel like I'm at the liquor store and I'm starting to see things in California. Like, it's just none of it. I think we're losing a little authenticity.
In New York, there's some bourbons distilled around here, but I wonder if you have that problem with your own, because at the liquor store you see so many different kinds of bourbons, and a lot of those brands are probably yours. Are you making too much, too many different kinds of bourbon?
Well, people like different recipes, if you will, and bourbon has a great story behind it, so a lot of our brands are literally hundreds of years old, and if we take a brand like Maker's Mark, it's distilled at a completely different location than Jim Beam, and Jim Beam is also distilling brands that we have acquired over the years, and people like variety, and actually one of the reasons you're seeing brands from other states is that bourbon has to be made in the U.S., but it doesn't have to be made in Kentucky. So there's this interest in distilling in lots of different states, and I believe 49 out of 50 states.
All right, well, hold on.
Let me ask, do you have a problem getting the next generation into distilling? Because you've got 7 generations, right, of Beams, and then No's. Now Fred No the third is your master distiller. Does he have kids that are distilling? Does he have grandkids that are into it?
His son, Freddie, now Junior, is the 8th generation. He's actually working at the plant right now. He graduated from college a year ago, so he's in an internship program. He'll work in every part of the facility to learn it, because there's a lot to learn in distilling. And then at some point, Fred's looking for his son to take over.
What's your favorite Beam brand?
My favorite, that's gonna hurt